The fantasy genre for books as of 2025 is going through a resurgence. With short-form video content, people across the globe have been able to find new movies, shows, and books. So, while many new series are getting covered, there is one that I haven't seen getting the love it deserves. So, if you aren't familiar with the Discworld, then welcome, and feel free to get comfortable. We may be here a while. Created by Sir, that is right, he was knighted, Terry Pratchett, in 1983. His very last book in the series would come out in 2015. As a whole, 41 books are credited to this series, with smaller studios picking up the works and turning them into films and radio shows alike. As for Pratchett himself, he was an English author creating his first book in 1971, was knighted in 2009, and would die in 2015 due to early onset Alzheimer's. And yes, in nearly every picture of him, he's wearing a black cowboy hat. However, before his passing, he used Discworld to touch on various topics, such as sports, religion, postal service, death, and of course, rock and roll, just to name a few. But commonly, he loved to satirize fantasy tropes, and in his 1989 book, Guards, it's no exception to this rule. The book itself focuses on the Watch, who are the police of this fantasy city, who mostly just stand around talking rather than doing any crime fighting, until someone comes to invert the Watch's status quo under the backdrop of a fire-spewing devil. Additionally, to preface, this is a summary, so there are smaller events that may not be talked about in depth. Nevertheless, this is Guards. It is said that the gods play games with the lives of men. But what games and why? And the identities of the actual pawns and what the game is, and what the rules are, who knows? Best not to speculate. Thunder rolled. It rolled the 6. Our first scene of the book opens not on any hero, but rather a figure flanked by brick walls as rain pouring down on them as they creep down an alley until they reach a door, only to knock a few times as a slit is opened. Password! The violet moon graces a new night. Wait, are you the Society of a New Order? Yeah. That's down the next alley. This is the Society of a Reborn Order. As we come to find out, this individual is a part of the least intimidating secret society. As previously seen, members are forgetting their passwords, using their real names instead of hidden identities, or getting distracted by long-off tangents. The only competent member is their supreme leader, who, after rallying the attention of fellow members, informs them that he has stolen a book, allowing them to restore leadership of their dear city. However, we do need a hero for this tale, and in this instance, we have Carrot Iron Founderson, who got the name for 2 reasons, that being his red hair, and also he is additionally a human raised by dwarves, and as such, with a life filled of mining and drinking, dwarven society is quite different from that of our normal human one. To quote, "All dwarves have beards and wear up to 12 layers of clothing. Gender is more or less optional." End quote. To be frank, this human plot of being raised by people smaller than they are, with a dedication to work and live in a quite hostile environment, does sound rather familiar. However, for Carrot, being well over 6 feet tall and living in mines, his father, thinking it would be best for his human son to live in an area where he is largely meant to be, decides to tell him to join the City Watch of Ankh-Morpork. The city of Ankh-Morpork gets its name from the river Ankh, which is the most polluted river in the Discworld. A river so polluted, in fact, that many claim that you can walk on it. In the city, old buildings are never torn down. Rather, you just build a new one on top of it. With that, the city has caves made out of old shops and houses forgotten to time. For the people above, everything is pragmatic. If you're going to sell a sandwich for $2, instead of 1, it better be twice as good as the $1 sandwich. For sweet, innocent Carrot, upon making it to the city and joining the City Watch, he has 3 others there to show him the ropes. Quote, "Sergeant Colin," he thought, as he stumbled into a musty gloom. Now there was a man who liked the dark. Sergeant Colin owed 30 years of happy marriage to the fact that Miss Colin worked all day and Sergeant Colin worked all night. They communicated by means of notes. He got her tea ready before he left at night. She left his breakfast nice and hot in the oven in the mornings. They had 3 grown-up children, all born. Vimes had assumed, as a result of extremely persuasive handwriting. And Corporal Nobbs, well, anyone like Nobby had unlimited reasons for not wishing to be seen by other people. You didn't have to think hard about that. The only reason you didn't say that Nobby was close to the animal kingdom was that the animal kingdom would get up and walk away. And then, of course, there was himself, Captain Vimes. Just a skinny, unshaven collection of bad habits marinated in alcohol. And that was the Night Watch. Just the 3 of them. Once there had been dozens, hundreds, and now just 3. End quote. So while they, in fact, are surprised that a damn strong 16-year-old wants to join, they ask him about what he knows about being a guard, to which Carrot responds as he starts listing the entire laws that the Watchmen are to follow. So already, Carrot is leagues ahead of anyone and is sent out for his first patrol of the day on his brand new job. After only a few hours, he is back as he has caught a thief, taking a pouch of coins off of an old woman in the local market. Unfortunately, the only crime here was arresting a member of the Thieves' Guild, who, due to the laws of the city, is allowed to commit such an act. Despite the trip-up, Carrot is given a shot at redemption. On a patrol with Nobbs, the 2 pass by a bar, a dwarven bar. Before reaching the door, a dwarf is thrown out and onto the street, with the door left open to anyone inside. To Carrot's dismay, brawls were commonplace here in the city, unlike that of the mountains in which he had grown up in. So, in marches a very tall human, and upon asking for their attention, a tankard is flung at him, colliding with his very breastplate. It's with this that Carrot reminds them of their mountainous and hardworking culture. As he tells them this, he then asks what their mothers would think if they saw them at this very moment. The other dwarves paused and thought briefly for but a moment, before one begins to shed a tear and runs back home to write to his mother. Satisfied with his work, Carrot turns around to see Nobb's jaw not dropped, but entirely collapsed beneath the bar floor. Learning curves aside, the guards are needed, for someone is dead. Not uncommon in Ankh-Morpork, likely that somebody didn't pay a debt or didn't pay a mugger, which would make sense in this instance, except the sight that remains is that of a body, burnt to a crisp with nothing but ash remaining. No wizard would have done this, not even a person could do this. Something did this. Something on a roof, overlooking the alley. Something big. So, an investigation begins into this death. Seeking to consult with a potential expert on this is Lady Sybil Ramkin, who, despite the title of lady, prefers being down in the dirt doing work with her hands. Her work, in fact, is that of raising swamp dragons in the city. Dragons that are not of what you would standardly think, and are more so the size of a house cat, used almost like fancy birds for the nobility. Lady Ramkin promises that while these dragons couldn't torch you to death, they could make you in certain need of a wig. As Lady Ramkin is giving out this information, she is taking care of one of her dragons named Errol, who is more so had the body of a cherry, rather than that of a fire-breathing beast. But for a dragon to just appear and disappear into thin air, it isn't exactly possible, because if you saw something the size of an elephant flying through the sky, you would likely not forget seeing it. As for our secret society, they are ecstatic, as the Supreme Leader's suspicion was correct. The book that he had was capable of summoning a dragon so long as there were enough components to maintain its existence. Knowing that the book can work, the Supreme Leader demands more components and reveals more of his plans to his barely capable followers. They would get someone they could easily manipulate to not only slay this dragon, but additionally to become the king of Ankh-Morpork. They would remove the current partition and leader, Lord Vetinari, and would allow for a secret society to rule from the shadows. All that was needed was more components to have the dragon summoned, again and for far longer. Speaking of the partition, Captain Vimes stops by his office and checks in on his old friend, Lupin Wants, who has been employed as veterinary secretary for some time. And Vimes rarely comes here, so try as Lupin might to find out why his old friend is here, Vimes knows that should word get out about a dragon that can appear and disappear in the city, it would likely not lead to anything good. So after waiting, Vimes gets to inform Vetinari of that very thing. Now Vetinari is a man of many things, and while he may not be the most moral man, making his renown being an assassin, his political knowledge has kept him in power for as long as he has. And it certainly has been a long time, as his appearance is described in a manner that reminds me of animated Count Dooku from Star Wars The Clone Wars. But overall, he tells Vimes to continue into their investigation and bring whoever it is to justice. Going ahead and leaving the partition's office, a brief conversation is had between both Vetinari and Wants. The dear secretary asks if an investigation should open. The following conversation begins. Quote, "Would you like me to investigate further?" said Wants. "Yes, do so. And shall I ensure the watch take great care?" said Wants. The partition stopped his pacing. The watch? The watch? My dear chap, the watch are a bunch of incompetents commanded by a drunkard. It's taken me years to achieve it. The last thing we need to concern ourselves with is the watch. End quote. Back with the other three of the watch, they are currently doing their usual work of standing around talking until approached by an orangutan. Both Colin and Nobbs tell the monkey to leave them alone. However, this orangutan is, for one, an ape, and two, the head librarian of the Unseen University of Wizards. And thirdly, and most importantly, is very pissed at these comments. As with a smack on the head, it is enough to get the two to get their shit together. Now for Carrot, who hasn't made a comment on the librarian's appearance, it's him who is dragged away to the library of the Unseen University. Here is where the wizards learn and study, with anyone not accustomed to the arcane, staying far away out of fear. Quote, "People were stupid sometimes. They thought the library was a dangerous place because of all the magical books, which was true enough. But what made it really one of the most dangerous places there could ever be was the simple fact that it was a library." End quote. It's completely likely that due to this very institution that the world had been destroyed and reborn thousands of times over in what could only be perceived as beyond the fraction of a second. And yet, here comes new recruit Carrot with the librarian in tow. While a tour is not what we are here for, the librarian keeps Carrot's time short, reaching a shelf with a notable lack of one book that has not been properly checked out. So, if the watch could kindly find the missing book and return it with some fruit in tow, then it would certainly make the librarian incredibly grateful. For our dear Captain Vimes, he isn't the only one to return to the watch, as Lady Ramkin has gifted Errol, the previously mentioned swamp dragon, to the watch, for him to be a sort of mascot, to the dismay of our quite unprepared guards. To the dismay of our quite unprepared guards. All the while, as Errol begins eating their pots and pans, the watch brings together that which they know. This dragon is big, but that means that something, or more likely someone, is causing it to appear in the city. It's with this that Sweet Carrot mentions that not only did he visit the library, but also one book is missing, that of summoning magical beasts, dragons, most notably, included in the pages of this text. So, it is someone who knows of this book's existence, where they can gain access to it, and can gain something from a dragon besieging the city, and it is them, somebody who fits that criteria that the Watch are looking for. There's a break in the investigation, as with a tip-off and a short party crashing from the Watch, the Secret Society are able to so kindly return our dear librarian's book. While a list of suspects would be the best course of action to get underway, as the saying goes, speak the devil's name, and they shall appear. Not only has the dragon returned, but now it is here for much more than a brief second. It is jumping and flying from roof to roof, with some collapsing under its weight and setting fire to those they have no intention of perching upon. The plot of the Supreme Leader is underway. It's within the blaze of the city, however, that a young individual steps forward, drawing a sword, and seeming to vanquish the flying beast within a mere moment. And as the crowd erupts into glee, it seems that the partition is no longer, as the King of Ankh-Morpork has decided to make their grand return. As, standing from within the cheering crowd, a hooded figure has a smile creep across their face as their manipulative new leader will begin to take the throne. But before that, someone needs to fill in as an intermediate, a middleman. And while Partition Veninari is removed from power and imprisoned as people committed riots outside of his palace, there are many lives lost in Ankh-Morpork at this very moment, as one of the members of this secret society, being that of Brother Watchtower, perishes. With the city burning around his corpse, his spirit is visited by an individual. Quote, he looked up at the hooded figure beside him. "We never intended this," he said weakly. "Honestly, no offense. We just wanted what was due to us." A skeletal hand patted him on the shoulder, not unkindly, and Death said,
"Congratulations."
End quote. It's in the blaze of the city, however, that as the guards are putting out fires and trying to protect the people, Vimes has a moment of clarity for his investigation. There's one particular figure that he sees darting away from the scene of the dragon, but the dash is one of familiarity to him, as he mentally marks it down. However, one question lingers in his mind. It's a short while later that, after being able to mentally collect his things, that once returns to his office. In short, doing some minor paperwork before a short knock comes at his door, as his dear old friend, Captain Vimes, has come to visit him for a brief moment. As a short conversation about the current political state of the city ensues, the tensions begin to build. Vimes gets fed up with the pleasantries. Swiftly cutting off the secretary, he says, quote, "Run," said Vimes softly. "What?" "Run. I want to see you run." I don't understand. I saw someone run away the night the dragon flamed that house. I remember thinking at the time that he moved in a funny way, sort of bounding along. And the other day I saw you running away from the dragon. Could almost have been the same man, I thought. Skipping, almost. Like someone running to keep up. Any of them get out once? End quote. It's with these, and putting the pieces together, that Vimes is able to properly ascertain the fact that the secretary is truly the one behind this plot, as creating a proper accusation against the man in charge leads to guards being rushed in and Captain Vimes being sent into the dungeon with the former partition. However, for the partition, now that a new king has returned to the city, his new home is unfortunately that of a cell, and similar to the partition, the dragon does not remain dead, merely moved away by magic into a space in which it can no longer occupy, as being so close to the unseen university, in the words kept within the tomes of wizards and the library. The words themselves allow the dragon to take on some of its power, being able to bend reality around itself and make a short and swift return, heading back to the palace in which it lay, taking up space within its grand hall. As the current king had a brief time in power, and the partition still remains in jail, it appears that the secretary is now the one taking charge. After a short meeting with other leaders of the city, from those of the Assassin's Guild and the university alike, it seems that the secretary is the one to go and meet the demands of their new tyrant. Now, unlike the former leader of this new king that he had instated, he is now missing a very crucial piece of his plan, a leader he can manipulate. and dragons are not one to be manipulated. So try as he might to convince the dragon, they aren't entirely made out of brawn and a lack of wits. Quote, he felt the sensation of the dragon rummaging around in his mind, trying to find a clue to understanding. He half saw, half sensed the flicker of random images of dragons, of the mythical age of reptiles, and here he felt the dragon's genuine astonishment of some of the less commendable areas of human history, which were most of it. After the astonishment came the baffled anger. There was practically nothing the dragon could do to the people that they had not, sooner or later, tried on one another, often with enthusiasm. You have the effrontery to be squeamish, it thought at him, but we are dragons. We were supposed to be cruel, cunning, heartless, and terrible. But this, I can tell you, you ape. The great face pressed even closer, so that once was staring into the pitiless depths of his great eyes. We never burned and tortured and ripped one another apart and called it morality. The dragon stretched its wings again, once or twice, then it dropped heavily onto a tawdry assortment of mildly precious things. Its claws scrambled at the pile. It sneered. A three-legged lizard wouldn't hoard this, it thought. There will be better things, whispered Wance, temporarily relieved at the change of direction. There had better be. Can I? Wance hesitated. Can I ask you a question? Ask. You don't need to eat people, surely. I think that's the only problem from people's point of view, you see, he added, his voice speeding up to a gabble. The treasures and everything, that doesn't have to be a problem, but if it's just a matter of, well, protein, then perhaps it has occurred to a powerful intellectual, such as your own, that something less controversial, like a cow, might... The dragon breathed a horizontal streak of fire that calcinated the opposite wall. Need, it roared, when the sound had died away. You talk to me of need? Isn't it the tradition that the finest flower of womanhood should be sent to the dragon to ensure peace and prosperity? But you see, we have always been moderately peaceful and reasonably prosperous. Do you want this state of affairs to continue? The force of the thought drove Wance to his knees. Of course, he managed. The dragon stretched its claws luxuriantly. Then the need is not mine. It is yours, it thought. Now get out of my sight. End quote. So with this, he flees the palace, hiding and scampering among the city streets and alleys as the rat that he is. As for those remaining and planning to stand against the dragon, the members of the Watch gather, the three of them and one dragon. But numbers advantage aside, the dragon has them severely outgunned in this instance. A war of attrition is not possible, and neither is one of defense, and what they have is a king, not an army. So they are prepared for an assassination, and not a war. They don't know how to poison a dragon, but they do know weapons, and what Nobbs is able to point out is what appears to be a weak spot within the dragon's scales. Down in the depths of the prison of Ankh-Morpork, Vimes officially joins Veterinary in his surprisingly nice prison cell that the once partition tells Vimes, quote, never build a dungeon you wouldn't be happy to spend a night in yourself. The world would be a happier place if more people remembered that. End quote. But it's during this that Veterinary tells Vimes that he isn't plotting to break out of his cell. Once the people are fed up with their new leader and the streets are filled with rioters, who will they break out as they remember that under his rule there was stability? As Vimes brews on this very idea, word has broken out and down into the prison that the new ruler has demands. They want a virgin sacrifice, and Lady Ramkin is to be there first. So while Veterinary plans on remaining in his cell, Vimes does not share the same sentiment, and thankfully, to the help of one librarian, is able to break out. As the new leader begins to patrol the city sky, the Watch has gathered what they needed: a dragon-killing bow and arrow. They have one literal shot to bring this dragon down, and with each beat of the dragon's wing it approaches the tower that Carrot, Colin, Errol, and Nobbs have taken up with a bow. So, with Colin bringing back the string, adjusting for the wind, and waiting for the dragon to get close enough in the early morning fog, he sees his moment. Quote, "And then the dragon wasn't approaching anymore. It was there, passing a few feet overhead. A streaming mosaic of scales and noise filled the entire sky. Colin fired. They watched the arrow rise, straight and true. It was 1,000,000 to 1 chance, and who is to say that somewhere in the millions of other possible universes, it might not have worked? That was the sort of thing the gods really liked. But chance can sometimes overrule even the gods, as 999,999 casting votes. In this universe, for example, the arrow bounced off the scale and clattered away into oblivion. Colin stared as the dragon's pointed tail passed overhead. It missed, he mouthed. End quote. The Watch had done everything in their power. They had lined this up absolutely perfectly. They even had their 1,000,000 to 1 chance come through, and yet still failed. However, there was one remaining card that the Watch had yet not played. What they had succeeded in was having enraged the dragon, and the tower is engulfed with flames. With a rapid descent, the 4 can survive as the tower comes crumbling down, and the dragon turns to Lady Ramkin, ready for a meal. While it is unknown exactly what caused the immediate actions of the small swamp dragon, what is known are the actions that the dragon took. Errol, as small as he is in comparison to the rather large leader of Ankh-Morpork, begins to take off into the sky, silently flying over the city walls, beginning to almost be covered in flames, like a fiery bullet. Everyone is able to notice that as he continues to speed up, flying out over the sea before rapidly turning back in, the small dragon begins rapidly flying towards the much larger beast. As mid-air, the 2 dragons collide. Thankfully, for the much smaller one, it's able to return to the ground, unlike the grace of their new leader, who comes slamming down onto the streets of Ankh-Morpork. However, with pitchforks drawn and ready to slay their former tyrant, it is Lady Ramkin who steps in to guard the beast's life. Quote, "Why don't you fight the bastard?" shouted Nobby at the dwindling dragons. "Bitch, Nobby," said Vimes quietly, "not bastard. Bitch. Why don't you fight—" "What?" "It's a member of the female gender," explained Lady Ramkin. "What?" "We meant that if you tried your favorite kick, Nobby, it wouldn't work," said Vimes. "It's a girl," translated Lady Ramkin. "But it's sodding enormous," said Nobby. Vimes coughed urgently. Nobby's rodent eyes slid sideways to Sybil Ramkin, who blushed like a sunset. "A fine figure of a dragon, I mean," he said quickly. Wide egg-bearing hips," said Sergeant Colin anxiously. End quote. While not technically done by the hands of the Watch, and more so the claws, they do get a large majority of the credit for 1, bringing down the dragon, but more so 2, being able to get a bead on the individual who created the plot to out the partition. However, this new partition, currently hidden away, after having the Watch come in and storm the palace, they are able to find him. Lupin wants. The man who summoned this dragon into the city had it burn the place damn near to Kingdom Come, have a false king placed upon it, have the false king swiftly outed, and have the dragon nearly kill one of its nobility only to be shot down out of the sky, and most importantly losing control of said beast. It's needless to say that a lengthy prison sentence, or maybe even a brand new necktie, is to be in order. As Captain Vimes and Carrot have him cornered back against a window, they have this to say. Quote, "Oh, give up," he said. "Are you going to come quietly?" The mumbling went on. The air began to feel hot and dry. Vimes shrugged. "That's it then," he said, and turned right away. "Throw the book at him, Carrot." "Right, sir." Vimes remembered too late. Dwarves have trouble with metaphors. They also have a very good aim. The laws and ordinances of Ankh and Morpork caught the secretary by the forehead. He blinked, staggered, and stepped backwards. It was the longest step he ever took. For one thing, it lasted the rest of his life. End quote. While not a proper prison sentence carried out, the law did hit him square in the face. But with a brief bit of time to free Veterinari, have him reinstated, a reward is deemed fit for the City Watch after all that they've done for him. While they do ask for a couple things, of course, a basic raise, a extra pot, some new cooking utensils for said pot, they also ask for a new dartboard, which, after a brief moment of silence from the partition, is met with not necessarily amusement, but a few exhales of the nostril, as their request is granted. With a new building established after the dragon had destroyed it, Lady Ramkin is able to give them an old home that she had, as is with all of this, that the City Watch, while not returned to its former glory, has surely begun its upswing. To end this out, quote, "On the far edge of the disk, the sun was rising. The light of the morning began to flow across the patchwork of seas and continents, but it did so slowly, because light is tardy and slightly heavy in the presence of a magical field. On the dark crescent, where the old light of sunset had barely drained from the deepest valleys, two specks, one big, one small, flew out of the shadow, skimmed low across the swells of the rim ocean, and struck out determinedly over the totally unfathomable, star-dotted depths of space. Perhaps the magic would last, perhaps it wouldn't, but then, what does?" End quote. And so brings an end to the story of Guards. Again, while I did not touch on everything, should you be so interested, I suggest you pick the book up for yourselves. As well, if there were any topics that you find in the reading or have found, you will note that Pratchett typically tends to let you come to your own conclusions on those specifics, as he merely is just proposing the question. However, if you stuck around this long and enjoy this form of content, please let me know. That aside, thank you for watching, and y'all are amazing.